Jess, and welcome back to Be Well with Dr. Jess, the podcast. Yes, I'm out here doing a podcast, y'all. Feels really good. I'm not gonna, make any apprehensions about it. It feels really good. I feel very intentional in this moment about what I'm sharing with you all, and I'm just gonna recap. So obviously, if this is your first time here, I want you to engage with this podcast starting here, but you will need to go back at least one or two episodes just to kind of take a deeper dive into what we're doing here with this podcast around just helping people get out of the rut. So, just listen today, but you can go back and listen to the others. But today I'm really thrilled to talk about something that has been a concept I have been exploring a lot online, probably since 2020, and that is self-care. Y'all know what I say, self-care is the best care. All right, so let's take a moment and go a little deeper into this. All right, so in the last episode where we explored romanticizing your life, we left off with self-care. And this is really a topic in itself. It's one I'm pretty excited about, and we're just going to get into it. All right, so let's start with my personal connection with self-care. I'm not going to pretend like I had an understanding beyond, going to get your nails done and your hair done. I mean, spending hours sitting in the salon, trying to negotiate with your hairstylist, bringing them lunch. Maybe that'll get you in the seat so that you won't spend the whole day there. I mean, yes, I did all that. Going to the nail salon, trying to figure out if you want to get, gels or acrylics today. But that was it. That was the concept in my understanding of self-care. And I'm not saying anything is wrong with those things, but to be honest, for the longest time, that's what I thought it was. It's like physical maintenance. It's the things you're doing to present yourself in the way that, you want to show up in the world. But as I evolved and obviously went into medical training and psychiatry, and specifically, I learned self-care means a little bit more than that. And so as I started my journey into medicine, became a psychiatrist, right? I'm working with patients. I began to understand self-care was definitely more than those things that I, kind of thought it was. Actually, I want to take a moment. Because two things that came to my mind as I'm sharing this with y'all is one, my mama taught me self-care, okay? And I'm particularly picturing life of a high school student. I'm in the band, I'm a cheerleader, I'm in all these clubs, right? But guess what I didn't have to do? I didn't have to cook a single meal, right? I didn't have to even worry about that, right? Mom's making sure I'm eating breakfast. We got the lunch hooked up. Dinner as well, right? Snacks. What's your favorite snack? What do you want when you go to the grocery store, right? None of that is a part of it. Also, because of the responsibilities of school and having a parent say it's time for bed, I didn't even have to be responsible for putting myself to bed. So shout out to you, Mom. You taught me self-care. Now bring it back to sitting in front of patients. What I quickly learned is y'all really neglect yourselves. You all really don't know how to put yourself to bed. You barely eat, you're skipping meals, and you're just, sitting connected to your phones all day. So it's not a judgment, it's low-key a judgment, but it's really more about an observation that I saw in my training, which is, again, you all have got to do a better job with taking care of yourselves, all right? Let's take it back. Let's take it on back. So today we're talking about self-care. We're going to get into the ways that I want you to start to really incorporate this and more intentionally into your life, because you all are adulting now, okay? It's time to really show up for yourself in the way, maybe your parents and those who raised you set that tone for you. So let's get into it. So I think it's important to really think about the ways that modern life has made it hard for us to pay attention to what's happening on the inside, right? There's so many luxuries and things that make life seem easy. I'll go back to food and meals, right? You don't really have to worry about thinking about what you're going to make for dinner. You can wait until your hunger cue is right there and rush and get takeout, or hop in the car, get in the drive-through, and just, voila, 10 seconds, or I won't say 10 seconds, 2 minutes later, there's your meal, right? You don't really have to engage and plan. And so a lot of modern living is just that. We are expecting things to come to us very quickly. We're expecting things to be easy. We're not really trying to invest in our lives in the same way that maybe, people from previous ages had to. And I'm not trying to present things as though, life decades before was easier, but I think there's something about slow living that we are totally moved away from. And I think it's essential to why many people who come into my office sort of struggle with that. So you're juggling a lot. You've got demanding work schedules. You are investing the majority of your time into a job. And for a lot of people who come in to see me, there may be job dissatisfaction that they're experiencing. You are now also, again, this is going to be something I talk about a lot, but you are overindulging in things like what's happening online, using your smartphone. You're just engaging in this kind of numbed out reality. And some of the ways it shows up with patients is, they come in and they report they're feeling depressed and anxious, right? And with deeper exploration, sometimes we uncover that it's some of these things I've already mentioned. Loneliness is a big part of what people feel. They're also struggling with burnout and just, again, this general disconnected way of existing in life. Like they literally are disconnected from themselves. And so, these are things, I'm not judging people for, going about life in this way. I mean, admittedly, there's been periods in my life where I definitely indulged in a lot of time online. I mean, I set this whole podcast up with my experience with just being chronically online. Some of that may have been driven by just feeling a little, trapped in the mundane aspect of, day-to-day living, but there's beauty in that. I'm always going to digress and tell you that. But for me, it really is about just bringing things personally back to the here and now. And I'm going to keep harboring on that throughout this podcast because I really think these are essential points that can help people just get back into the groove of things. So personally, it has looked like spending too much time online, maybe, overindulging with takeout and going out to restaurants and just kind of putting off responsibilities. Because remember, I told y'all, my mama taught me self-care. Okay. So a lot of the things that I was kind of growing up with having this ease of just not planning for meals and things of that nature, it came because someone else was doing the work. And so now as an adult, it's time for me to do that. And so I'm imparting that onto you, but also because I have the experience of talking to lots of people in office who struggle with this. All right. So let's talk about some common themes and we'll kind of take it from there. And so as I shared, these are just some common themes that show up in the work I'm doing with patients. It's shown up in my own life and, people who message me online talk about this. So let's first talk about burnout. This is a concept that it isn't a true sort of medical diagnosis, but it is understood to be one. In fact, there's a billing code for it. So there's a concept that if you overinvest in, let's say, work, which is typically where burnout shows up, but it can also show up with, being responsible for taking care of a family, children, someone who needs your help. But it shows up by really experiencing symptoms that look very much like depression. I mean, there is low mood, there's this sort of disenchantment, there's a little bit of a jaded quality that people might experience with their work. They also may experience difficulties sleeping or feeling like they can put their best foot forward. And all of this simply boils down to you have literally poured everything out of your cup and there is nothing left. And so here walks into the room looking like a nice tall glass of water. I like my water icy. So a nice chilled glass of water is self-care. Self-care is walking into the room to remind the person who's experiencing burnout, you've got to fill your cup back up. And we're going to get into the ways to do that. But self-care in and of itself, self-care is really the first thing I tell patients when they tell me they're struggling with burnout. That and, take a vacation. So for anyone out there experiencing burnout, just picture self-care as an opportunity to really rest, reconnect, and fill your cup back up. All right? Loneliness. I mean, this one is heartbreaking for me too, because when someone comes in to see me and they're describing a life where they feel alone or they feel like they have not found their people or they just feel kind of forgotten. I mean, my heart breaks for that. It's heartbreaking, right? As humans, we need people. We need to be connected, not just to secure our needs, but just the psychological benefits, the emotional benefits. So when I hear this, my heart really breaks for the person. But we can always get in there. And so for loneliness, there's many definitions, but what I kind of stick to when I'm sharing with people is you want to think about loneliness as the difference between the life that you picture and the life that you have. And so that's why for some people that distance can look different, right? And I'm gonna give you an example, right? Let's say you are someone who has a lot of friends, and someone on the outside would be like, why do you feel lonely? Part of that could be because you actually want closer connections with these friends. And so loneliness shows up for you because there is a gap between what you are expecting and what you are experiencing. Yes, you're surrounded by people. Yes, people would imagine that you aren't feeling lonely, but in fact, you want to have a deeper connection. And so because you don't have that, or you feel you don't, you experience loneliness. And then it can be the obvious, like you literally want more friends and you can't even count, any friends on one hand, right? This is really a deficit. All of that to say, self-care, again, walks into the room as the ultimate example of what friendship can mean. And it starts with learning how to love and care for yourself, right? I can't seek out friendships, those deeper connections I might be longing for, if I haven't really gotten to know what I need, right? If I'm able to take care of my needs, then maybe I can forge those deeper connections with friends, right? Or maybe I can start making more friends. So think of self-care as really being the ultimate friend, right? And this is because you are learning through practicing self-care how to love yourself, how to be there for yourself, how to address that loneliness. Another example that I've touched on is when people feel disconnected from themselves. And this can look like many different things. What I'm imagining when I describe this is someone who's really just feeling, they just appear stuck. They feel stuck. The language that they're using is just like, there's no way out. They're describing things in a way where I just can't help in my seat, but to feel kind of boxed in and trapped. In this example, I'm like imagining, patients who come in and they're describing really being so dissatisfied or unhappy with their jobs. And sure, the types of jobs they're describing are not necessarily jobs that have a lot of upward mobility, but, it's sustaining those needs. So, you're doing something, you're contributing, but their mind shapes this as such that, this is hell for them. Another way that one might appear disconnected from themselves is also just struggling with experiencing the range of emotions, right? Like they are so preoccupied with the anxiety, with fearing being judged, with, holding back emotions, with really only telling some people some things. They're just kind of leading this very closed in life. And then when I ask them to, well, tell me about the things you like to do, they can't really list anything because they've cut themselves off so much from the experience, like the expansiveness that comes with just accepting life for what it is and what comes your way, that they aren't really experiencing any emotions. And so their focus is, again, really on the ways that life is difficult for them. And without kind of going on and on about this, but the other piece that I think also shows up is these, people who are disconnected, they just aren't enjoying life. Like they're describing things like, I'm meeting people, but it's not really sticking. Or, I want to have a relationship, but, they're all the same. It's just this kind of idea. They're kind of relating in this way that they've already given up. And so, again, self-care enters into the room. I think this time I'm picturing self-care with like a cape on, right? Self-care is just going to swoop down and fly you away so that you can just take a moment and get back into your body. Feel what you feel, which means you're going to take the good with the bad. You're going to take those moments when you're feeling, just the joy of whatever brought you that joy, right on down to what's making you feel sad and anxious. Like you're no longer going to avoid what you're feeling. Self-care is going to look at you and say, we need to feel what we're feeling so that you can get out of this rut and just take life for what it is, right? It's not guaranteed to be anything except what you're experiencing. And there's power in that. And lastly, this is not a judgment, but I do want to make a relationship between substance use and being disconnected, burned out, lonely, right? Not engaging in healthy self-care. And so for those out there who like to, use substances of any sort to kind of cope. I'm always gentle with this because I'm not really judging anyone for using a substance. I'm definitely not. But let's be honest, substance use for some people, I'm talking about the, smoking and drinking. It's not just about letting your hair down and having a good time. It really becomes like a a pillar for your survival, for your ability to function. I don't know about y'all, but I've walked into plenty, businesses and I'm like, whoa, it smells like a pound in here. Like, oh my God, what are y'all doing? But I get it. It's stressful, So let me get back to the point. The point I'm making is if you are experiencing a deep reliance on substances to help you cope with day to day, it really can be an indication that you need to let self-care come on in. This time I'm going to picture self-care as like, I don't know, a person sitting next to you on the couch during like a smoke sesh, or maybe self-care is like the bartender at the bar. And what they're saying is like, this is your last one. Okay. You're done for now. Let's get into what maybe you are avoiding so that you can look at these substances. It's just, just a moment to like let your hair down, unwind, enjoy the moment. Self-care is going to be about going inward to understand what you're avoiding so that these substances aren't becoming really an unhealthy coping strategy. Okay? So let's bring this back to self-care, right? I'm telling you the ways that self-care can show up for you in these areas where, I've seen patients struggle. I've struggled in some of those areas. People have written to me and said they've struggled in these areas. Let's get back to like what self-care is. So, I shared my understanding of self-care in the beginning was just like physical maintenance, like the stuff you're doing to look good. And then I threw out there, well, my mama taught me self-care. This is really where my understanding began to shape when I was sitting across from patients and I noticed like, hey, the virtual practice, I get to see people in their homes, which is really helpful. And I noticed like, okay, it's 2:00 and they look like they're sitting in a dark room, but there's a window behind them. Blinds are shut, curtains are not drawn. They're literally not seizing a day. Right away, my mind goes to like, not really adequate self-care, right? The other piece is people would tell me like, oh yeah, I skip meals, or, I really don't know what to eat, so I don't eat. And this isn't rooted in some sort of like disordered eating, but it's really about like they're not planning or they're just waiting until the last possible minute to eat. Again, I started to wonder and get curious about, okay, wait a minute. Is this really a thing? The other parts is I noticed people would say, I get off work, I do want to socialize, but I'm too tired. So I just sit on the couch and I scroll. So again, are you kind of getting where I'm going with this? So let me take it back to my mom. So what I'm thinking about is in my like early life, when I was doing all the things, taking care of my social and sort of psychological well-being by like socializing, who was taking care of the basic needs? My mom. So that meant I am eating 3 meals a day. I'm being reminded to snack. In fact, I'm being reminded that I'm hangry and maybe I need to go in there and get a snack, right? I'm being reminded that it's important to go to bed, get your sleep, turn out the light, get off your phone, TV's off. You see where I'm going with this? I'm also being reminded like, hey, you can't just sit on the couch all day. Go outside, ride your bike, go for a run, right? These are aspects that we maybe grew up having someone else like kind of, just put into us. But as we became adults, it's something that we let go. But those are really the pillars and foundation of having a pretty solid mental health and sort of overall well-being. Okay, so I'm talking about taking care of basic needs. Now, as this evolved further, my more recent work with patients, that is the first thing I said. Like, when in doubt, I want you to get proper sleep tonight. Let's make sure you're eating adequate and nutritious meals, and let's make sure that you're moving your body. There has become in my awareness a different way to also approach this, and that is also understanding the psychological benefits, right? So take that high school girl, Dr. Jess. Mom was taking care of my basic needs, but what was I doing? I was a cheerleader. I was a part of every club. I'm socializing with friends. Friends are coming over to my house to stay over. I'm staying over at people's houses. Like, I am engaging in social connectedness. And that is an essential part to what helps people feel better overall too. All right. So it's important. Self-care begins with taking care of your basic needs, sleep, adequate rest, right? Eating appropriate meals, moving your body, but also your social needs. And the last one is paying attention to what's happening on the inside. Are you irritable today? Maybe you need to get more rest. Maybe you need to eat a little bit more food. Maybe you need to eat the right foods. Or maybe you need to connect with people. And so I'll make this a little bit easier. There is an acronym called HALT. All right, you can write it down. You're going to ask yourself, am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? The answer to any of these or yes, you need to explore it. You need to try to address it. So self-care is really the best care. Self-care, as with anything that I'm introducing to you all, it does not have to be perfect, but I do want you to make it a priority. And again, you're going to be hearing the same thing that I tell patients. All right, we're going to help you with depression and anxiety. Obviously, I'm not helping you with depression and anxiety. Maybe you'll go, seek out therapy or, reach out to me if you're interested in care. But this is the same concept I tell them, is we are definitely going to work together on that. But here's some things I need you to do at home. I need you to get in bed, turn that TV off, put the phone somewhere else. Yes, you can set it so it can ring if there's an emergency, but cut it off. Right? I need to know that you are taking care of your meals. If you are not, let's meal plan. If you're a student, let's get together with some of your colleagues and maybe you all can have a revolving, dinner dates where everyone's meeting up at each other's dorms and that's where we brainstorm, right? That's the other sort of, that's a plug for therapy. You really get to get into your specific experience. But right now I'm listing examples. So these are the types of things I tell people, right? I'm really getting in there to understand how can we make sure your basic needs are met? And then we push it further. How can we get you out the door? How can I have you connect with one friend? Even if it's a friend who's just going to sit next to you while you're depressed, that is an opportunity for you to connect, right? And try to grow that. It's understanding okay, maybe you don't feel like going out with your friends, but how do you feel when you get there? People are usually I feel better. I'm I know you feel better, right? I know this. You feel better, so just go, right? Just get out there, see what happens. Right? How do you feel when you move your body a little bit? Well, going to the gym in the beginning, I don't feel that great, but yeah, afterwards I feel good. Okay, so just go. So this is, again, a little bit of what I'll be doing or I do with patients, but it's what I'm hoping to convey to you, which is get out there, get started. It's going to feel better once you do it, but it's essential to help you feel, even killed when it comes to your mental health and well-being. Get out there, y'all. And so I've listed off a lot of examples about self-care, but I do want to anchor you here. So think about self-care as physiological needs. In other words, the basic needs I have to get through every day for survival. You've got to sleep. You've got to eat, right? You've got to have water. Then I also want you to incorporate psychological needs. So that's, checking in on how you're feeling, checking in on what might trigger certain feelings, checking in on just the mood state. Also, the social well-being, right? How many times have you connected with people? Is it just by texting or online? Are you doing things in person? Do you feel like you want to connect with people? Are you connecting with people? All of these things really, I think, as I understand it right now, but I'm still evolving, is I think you're in a good place if you can do those things. And so how can you start, so I want you to start incorporating this little by little daily. Right? So you're already romanticizing your life by now. And if you haven't gotten to that episode or this is your first one, just go back an episode and kind of, hear that one out. But you're doing that. And now you're also going to pay more attention to how you're taking care of yourself. I want you to be your mom, or that caregiver in the back of your mind, it's bedtime, okay? Or you need to eat something different than that. No, a bowl of Cheerios is not going to do it. You need something more nourishing in the morning, right? I want you to take care of yourself in that way. Start little by little. It can start with a meal. It can start with being intentional about moving your body. It can start with picking up the phone and saying, I'm just going to call someone who's on my mind instead of just keeping that thought about them back here. I'm going to assume that that's a signal for my body and brain saying, it's time to reach out and not just take this as oh, I thought about them. No, maybe your mind is telling you to call someone because you're freaking lonely, right? So just start little by little. We're not going to be putting any pressure on ourselves. We're just starting to incorporate more of these elements so that ideally this rut that you're in, you're shaking it up a little bit, right? You're getting motivated. So I feel like I'm priming you for what's to come for the remainder of this season. So let's, take a moment. I want you to reflect. If you're listening to this podcast somewhere where you can stop what you're doing and jot down some notes, I encourage you to do that. If you aren't, that's fine. I believe that things kind of wash over us and you can replay it. But I really want you to reflect on the ways that you can improve your self-care. If this is a concept that's completely new to you, what resonated with you. I want you to kind of start with that. That might be the first little, small win that you can work towards. If you've been deeply entrenched already in self-care, but there could be ways to be more connected with it, right? It's become so routine that you're not even switching things up. Try to switch it up a little bit, right? I want you to be a little bit open in how you are going to take care of yourself, right? We have to do that in our lives, right? If you're doing everything the same way every day, you got to switch it up. So maybe it's time to do that, all right? The next episode, we're going to keep going into this, right? This season, again, it's all about trying to help you get out of a rut, and I'm hoping to lay a foundation that gets you going in that process, all right? So thank you for listening. Share this with everybody, all right? I want you to share this with anyone who you know could do a better job taking care of their needs. Let's not send a little nasty soundbite with it, but just, say, look, this is something Dr. Jess told me to send you, all right? And always remember, you are not your pain, you are love. Be well.